Hello everyone. In this video, I want to speak about this new moon, which is happening Thursday, tomorrow in the US. It's a very, very tight opposition with Uranus in Taurus. So let's share my screen right here. I have put the sun on the first house. So note the incredible tightness of this opposition. It's just 7 minutes from an exact opposition. There are a couple of things to note here. Anytime a planet outside of the Earth's orbit is opposite the sun, that's the midpoint of that planet's retrograde cycle. So we're going to have to speak to that. This is the midpoint of the Uranus retrograde journey. Uranus opposite the sun and moon, squaring Saturn. Now Saturn has not too long ago gone direct, and it's picking up speed. It's picking up speed and it's moving towards a very tight conjunction with Uranus at 11 degrees. This will happen in a month or so from now, a month and a half. So Saturn is very activated, and I can say even that the particular teachings and lessons of Saturn are really coming on board right now. It's really activated by this new moon, and we're going to find ourselves becoming a lot more attuned to the Saturn in Aquarius from this point on. I want to give attention to just this new moon in context to the next full moon. So let's progress a little bit forward. In about 2 weeks from now, we have a full moon at 26 degrees, or say 27 degrees or so, Scorpio Taurus, which very tightly squares Jupiter. I made a video yesterday speaking about this Jupiter, and it's approaching completion to its square to the node. So Jupiter is going to be very activated as well during this next full moon. And it's just meaningful to note how strong the fixed energies are during this lunar cycle. This whole time we have Mars in Scorpio as well. In fact, this Mars in Scorpio is just hanging out during this entire month of November. And we'll want to give some attention to this Mars in Scorpio. It's going to square Saturn. It's going to be moving over the new moon points. It's very active here. So let's turn back to this upcoming new moon and tune into the energetics. More or less, here's the chart. It's useful first to just appreciate when we're dealing with such a strong fixed archetype, right? Mars, new moon, Scorpio, Uranus and Taurus, Saturn and Jupiter and Aquarius. Note, Leo is the only empty space here. So that's worthy to give some attention to. The energy of the fixed signs in astrology are about consciousness becoming centralized, essentialized, focused. In some way, all of the fixed signs speak to the essential quality of this human soul existence, right? The unchanging essential nature of the soul, who we are, relative to the changing of everything else, Scorpio. The need to be here, to live, to survive, to have a sense of self-value and purpose and personal meaning in living on this earth in a body, Taurus. Leo, creative self-actualization. I am a unique expression of divine intelligence. Aquarius, our essential individuality, is the objective nature of creative intelligence as things are, the nature of things as it is created, according to the fractal nature of consciousness, of divine creation. These signs all point to just what is. It's centralized, whether it's intellectual or intelligence, with Aquarius, purely creative, Leo, sensual, ground, earth, Taurus, soul, watery, right, depth, Scorpio. When we're in a period where the emphasis is on the fixed signs, it takes us into ourselves to know who we are. And to know who we are is really, as per the fixed signs, essentially, it's to live in a way that isn't comparative. It's not looking towards what do other people do, how are other people, how do others live, how do others actualize, what are other people's soul path. It's becoming very oriented towards what's my path? What's my work to do? What's my creative purpose? How do I want to live here? How do I want to actualize? We really need to become so internal and aware of there is a unique purpose to my existence. I need to know myself. Something I'm always thinking about, well, not always, but deeply reflective upon, and an ongoing point of meditation for me is just the understanding that we actually have a lot more agency over our thoughts. We have a lot more agency and power over our thinking. We tend to live in some state of disempowerment wherein we really believe that our thoughts are contingent upon the environment, and thus we're living in a way where we're responding to the stimulus of the environment around us. But to really know ourselves, to know our power, to know the truth of our soul agency, is to come into this deeper understanding and practice. It's a practice, meaning if we're coming from a state of being that doesn't know how powerful we are, where we don't realize our capacity and our freedom of choice, it means we have to practice remembering this. And so it's very powerful to come into this practice and remembering of taking full responsibility for our own thinking, how we're choosing to orient and direct our consciousness. And this is Scorpio. At the core, it is Scorpio. And one of the deepest teachings from the evolutionary astrology world from Jeff Green that I just really respect and is a bottom line point of meditation for me. Scorpio Pluto at the core points to two choices: the choice to resist or cooperate with evolution. And on some level, resisting will always imply not knowing that we can think differently, not knowing that we can make new choices, which itself points to what we want, right? Our thinking and thus our choices is really going to point us back to what it is that we really want, what we're trying to get out of this life experience. When our primary attention is on our growth, our empowerment, our evolution, we're going to find ourselves in all circumstances, in a growing number of circumstances and experiences, a greater and greater capacity to go within and decide, how do I want to be in relationship to this? What do I need to learn and claim about myself to take full responsibility for my experience, to grow and evolve? Doing this is not easy. So I know that. And this is why, for all of us, the evolutionary journey is difficult. Something Jeff Green has also beautifully said, evolution is generally very slow. It takes a long time because we all tend to not like being insecure. Right? We tend to gravitate towards security and familiarity, and we tend to resist insecurity. And there's a need to face our own insecurity. Whenever I move through these phases, right, where there's strong Scorpio transits or my own Scorpio stuff is activated, it's not comfortable. And I find that my predominant vibration in particular at first is one of resistance, which means on some level a psychology of victimization, where the outer world, people, places, and things is affecting how I feel. And my choices are really coming from that state of moving according to a more gross level of awareness, craving and aversion. Oh, I want this or I want to avoid that. But not necessarily going to the deeper places at first. And I often find it's a struggle, right? It's like I have to toil a little bit with the energetics of resistance. And one way or another, we have to face it. We have to face the energetic reality of our resistance, of the discomfort of being insecure, of the very places where we don't want to claim full responsibility for our vibration, for our choices. One thing's promised along the soul journey, which is evolution. And the metaphor of the caterpillar and the butterfly is beautiful because it points to a consciousness that is not the butterfly and is not the caterpillar. Right? The consciousness that knew itself as caterpillar eventually comes to a point where it plays out that caterpillar paradigm and it can't grow any further. It needs to bring that to a close. And so it has to move into an involutionary period where it lets go of what it's known. And then it comes into a new form, which is butterfly. But its essential nature is neither butterfly or caterpillar. Our essential nature is soul, eternal, unborn, undying. This is our ongoing realization. And we're all to some degree, to various degrees, identified with the ephemeral. And that's just true. It's just how it is. And that's not something we can transcend. So we start with where we are. And we meet the calling of our own rhythm. We meet the calling of our own soul journey to where evolution wants to happen right now. We have to recognize the forms that I've known, the ways that I've known myself. It's served, but I have to accept the fact that I'm ready for the next step. There will be more steps after that. We're going to keep on evolving. There's an ongoing journey here. It takes a long time until we are fully soul identified. But we have to appreciate there's always the next level. And it's all about, do we want to evolve? Simple as that. Simple as that. And as complicated as that. It's simple because it's simple. It's very binary. Do I want to evolve or not? If so, turn to page, do what it takes. Look at yourself. Meet the shadow, meet the resistance, meet the fear. Meet the hurt. All the ways in which we want to respond or take revenge or get back or close up or be jaded or distrust life because of how it makes us feel or what it's done to us. If yes, turn to page, right, so that's the no page, right? If yes, turn to page, all of this is reflecting what's inside of me, right? There must be a path forward. Now, so when we take this path forward, it's uncomfortable because we're going to not know what comes next. I often think of evolution as a sort of counterintuitive motion from the perspective of the ego, because it's moving in the direction that, according to our conditioned consciousness, our ego consciousness, feels like death. It's like, why would I do that? Why would I want to do that? I think Ken Wilber once gave the analogy to evolution can feel like running a car into a brick wall. It's like, why would anyone want to do that? But the more soul identified, the more we become identified with wanting true power, like wanting to know who we truly are, the more, one, we'll get curious about the possibility of claiming sovereignty over our thoughts and thinking and choices. And two, the more willing we will be to apply new thoughts, new behavior, new choices in new experiences. And one final thing I'll say on this note is the power of free will is a variable. It's an agent that is not on the chart, meaning the archetype of the soul and the nature of our freedom to choose and evolve or not is a Scorpio-Pluto archetype. But whether we do that or not, it's not on the chart. It's absolutely not on the chart. That's a present moment choice. If it wasn't a present moment choice, there would be no reality to evolution. We'd all just be some sort of pre-programmed lemming running this mechanical course. The fact that each soul is of creator, is one with its source, means that in our own soul evolutionary growth, in our own realization, we are actually claiming, returning to the awareness and the recognition of our inherent agency and freedom, just as the source has inherent agency and freedom. And there's a lot of beauty to reflect on in this, and I'm not going to get too philosophical around fate versus free will, simply to recognize the choice to evolve or not, the choice to know who we are, which is one with the only reality there is, or not, is absolutely within our hands. It's absolutely within our domain. It's a beautiful thing to really drop into. And thus, not being on the chart there are two things to say. There's an immense amount of momentum that we each build in our life where we don't know our capacity for choice. There's actually a story in the Torah where, let's see, Hashem was telling Moshe, God was telling Moses to tell Pharaoh, let my people go, let the Israelites out of Egypt. And there came a point where it says, and God hardened the heart of Pharaoh. Pharaoh's heart was hardened. And he couldn't say yes, right? He couldn't say, sure, go and do it. It just became a pure psychological state of resistance. And I remember learning this beautiful reflection and insight on that we can just entrain our resistance, our patterning to the point where we just become so hardened. We become so far away from our knowledge that we can choose. We become very distant from the understanding of our own agency, where resistance just becomes the fact. We won't think of it as resistance because we don't realize what we're identified with when we're identified with it. So resistance just becomes a reality, and it's going to have its own justification. No, I will not. And there's a whole lot of, Mitzrayim in Egypt, in Hebrew is Mitzrayim, which means narrow places, confinement. There's a lot of metaphor in this story. And so we can get to this place where we're so entrained in a patterning of resistance, which is fear, control, manipulation, shutting down, living in either a disempowered state or a distrustful state, that we don't even realize that at a certain point we've just began to choose in a particular direction to the point where we forgot that we were choosing, and it's just become habit. And so it's useful to appreciate that and recognize that our capacity for choice is generally greater than what we realize, which means in any particular moment, in the face of psychological triggers and content that feels really uncomfortable for us, we actually have the capacity to choose, but we have to often meet the immense momentum of resistance patterning that has been built up over a long period of time. And this is where our practice is so important. Our practice of going within, our practice of meeting ourselves with absolute honesty and willingness to look. And then to come back to, what is it I want? How do I want to feel? What's my greatest purpose? And the depth of insight that emerges from that place is great. And luckily, life is vibrational. When we begin to look inside, that's a program that affects external circumstance. Right? All of life begins to move with us as we shift our orientation. So this is highlighting the Scorpio archetype right now. Super strong, super important. And as Mars moves through Scorpio, Mars is about choice. Mars is a lower octave of Pluto. Mars is the soldier that executes the particular moment-to-moment decisions that will serve the desires of the soul. As a soul, if I want to live in resistance, if I want to live seeking security through various facets of the world that I need to control and sustain, if I need you, this, that, to be what I feel that I need it to be to feel good, then Mars is going to execute particular choices to maintain a reality around that. Right? Whatever our underlying desires, I want to experience what it's like to be famous and powerful. Okay, Mars, go and make choices accordingly. Or I want to really know what it's like to find out who I am, to know the power and the stability of my own soul, and to give to others. Right? To live a life where I'm giving from my empowerment, and through giving, I get to know who I am. That's one of the deepest teachings here. When we give, we receive. When we also are demonstrating that our capacity to love, our capacity to give, our capacity to be the light that we are, doesn't depend on other people, places, and things. So our giving and our demonstrating of what we are is one of the most powerful ways that we actually ground and affirm and solidify our choice to evolve. It's how it's really actualized. And so if that's what we want, then Mars will make choices accordingly. So Mars is a very powerful archetype when it comes to how we're executing and making decisions. So follow Mars through your chart. Where's Scorpio? Where's Mars moving? It's going to be in Scorpio for the next month or two, well into December. So it's very worth keeping our attention on that. All right, so let's look at the fact that this is opposite Uranus. Two things to point out. It's the middle of the retrograde journey. If anyone wants to purchase my Uranus retrograde class, I actually taught it, I think it was when Uranus was conjunct the sun. So half a cycle ago. Or maybe it was when Uranus was going retrograde. One of those 2 points is when I taught the class. But all of these retrograde classes, by the way, are available. The whole series is available, as well as individual classes. So that would be a great way to go deeper into the Uranus archetype with lots of examples and just more elaborate teaching. The midpoint of the Uranus retrograde journey in Taurus really speaks that greater reflection upon, where does my stability come from? Right? We want continuity and security and stability. I want to know where my food, shelter, water is, my basic needs. How am I going to survive? And so there's that draw towards the past. Right? I want to make sure I'm able to secure everything that I have, that I know where this is going. But then there's the fear of losing it all. This need to go within and actually liberate from conditioned constructs and ideas and familiarity with how we've lived. Even if it's secure, there's a sense of we can't bring the past with us anymore. We have to appreciate that where we're going is beyond the conditioned constructs of where we've been. And so, over the past few months, there's been a lot of movement, especially with this Mercury and Libra squaring all of this Capricorn stuff and Aries, Chiron. There's been a lot of strong conversations, dialogue, reflections, deep insight, powerful processes. But at this point, we still don't know where all of this is going. It's like there's a future that is very profound and illuminating, but it doesn't exist within the conditions of our mind. And that can be scary for Uranus and Taurus. And it's very tempting here to project the future from more of a doomsday perspective, right? Here are all the ways in which I feel disempowered and fearful and stuck, Scorpio. So here are the ways in which I need to secure a future that makes me feel secure by recreating past conditions. There's a need here to appreciate and take a moment to grab the words. That our freedom is actually only in the moment. And our freedom is never going to take the past with us. It's never going to go into the future. It's never going to be fixated on what was. It's never going to be anxiously consumed with what will be. It's always in the moment right now, and it always tends to, what's my relationship to this moment? How am I living right now? And so this is an opportunity to clear the slate, to live without fear, and to let go to the journey when we don't need to know. There's a lot of freedom. That whatever's going to unfold is going to be really great. It's going to be evolutionary. But let's look at, where are we uncomfortable? Where are we in resistance? Where are we in fear? There can be a false materialism here, right? Of thinking, I need these conditions in order to feel secure. But our security isn't linked to these particular conditions. We want to elevate and evolve, come into a more higher intelligence and appreciation for how our physical life can provide for us in all the essential ways. And what's significant as the midpoint is we are really called to self-actualize. Look at our inherent worth, our inherent value, and not plan the future according to the past ideas that just want to maintain the status quo. Get excited. Like for me right now, I'm planning my next course for next year, my training program, and I'm like loving it. It's unbelievable. I have hundreds of pages of workbook content. hundreds, maybe even more than hundreds, to tell you the truth, of transcribed material from my course. Just the first third of the course that I've taught. You know, hours and hours and hours of video content, and I've built a whole platform for these teachings, and I'm now looking back at it again and creating a structure for the second year, and it's going to be so much better. And this is also allowing me to plan financially. How will this support my family? How can I structure my time? It's going to be a completely new experience. So to feel that, yes, we can move into the future in a new and excited way, but do the work to claim where we might be taking disempowered thinking into the future with us, because that will just create a lot of unnecessary fear and resistance. Oftentimes with strong Uranus transits, and this is something to pay attention to with Jupiter and Aquarius as well, we will tend to look into the future according to the trauma of the past. And thus we'll interpret upcoming events or dreams or signals in a way that feels like, oh, that's really scary, or I had a really scary dream, or these signs and messages feel like there's a doomsday scenario about to happen. And really it's just representing dynamics within consciousness that want to be healed, right? It's arising now, not in the future, now. To be seen, to objectify it, look at it, observe it, right? Observe it. See, okay, this right here is fear, dread, anxiety. That doesn't resonate with truth, which means it's coming up right now to be looked at and felt so it can be healed. Very, very important teaching with Uranus that's often missed, because we often take that and we become anxious and nervous. So very liberating, very powerful, and this could be very uncomfortable. This can feel uncomfortable right now, but also really opening and liberating. If we commit ourselves to doing our work, looking at ourselves, this can just be a profoundly illuminating and liberating time, where we might find ourselves coming into realizations that we didn't expect ourselves to come into. Let's close this with a look at Saturn, which is really of essence here. So again, Saturn's building steam. It's going to be really active over the next couple months as it moves to square Uranus. Saturn corresponds to how we are consciously working with structure and form in time and space with respect to what our deeper intentions and purpose is. We're always conditioning ourselves. Right? Our consciousness here is very malleable to habit. So anything that we repeat will become habituated. So Saturn speaks of the dimension where we're taking our deeper evolutionary work and we're wanting to say, okay, here's how I'm in relationship to every facet of my life. Here's a posture that I've conditioned. Is it functional? Is it working? Is it taking me where I want to go? So we often need to unravel conditioned patterns with Saturn and work over time to condition new habits, new patterns. This new moon is really opening an important phase of work within the Saturn realm. And here's how I would describe this. The structural reality that we've known is based upon the worlds that we've created in the past. The decisions we've made based upon the nature of our consciousness, the degree of our resistance, has always manifested on a Saturn level in the habits and patterns and posturings that we've repeated over and over and over again. In relationship, in family, in work, in health, in every facet of our life journey. To create new patterns means becoming deeply introspective and reflective of where we want to go and what we need to face about ourselves in order to get there. This is a sort of like Scorpio, Saturn, right? Aquarius, Aquarius and Scorpio. Like, look at yourself. Take full responsibility, but don't get entangled, right? Aquarius says step apart from it and actually see that we have the capacity to think differently right now. And this brings me full circle to the emphasis on choice. I can't emphasize how powerful this is. Remember, choice isn't on the chart. And so when we choose to orient towards our evolution, we will often find ourselves making fundamentally new choices that we've never made before. And we can move through these times not making these choices and experience the same patterns of evolutionary growth and realization, and continue to grow at the rate that we're growing. Or we can move through this particular window of time and see that we've been gearing up to harvest a significant level of self-knowledge. And we have the opportunity to see a possible direction perhaps that we've never walked before. And it's not going to come from the chart. It's not going to come from someone telling us that this is what we're going to do. There's this archetypal story around these deeper choice points that we make in our life, where it actually has to come from an internal knowing, an internal space of recognition. And these choices are going to say this is what we're setting up and how we're establishing a long-term plan for ourselves. And we see as Saturn moves into that square with Uranus later this year, we're going to find in a very profound stress to liberate, right? To wake up from the state of repression and limitation that we've all been living within, which means conditionings, patterns that aren't useful or relevant for us, but also new forms, new patterns that we've never known before. So it's a powerful and exciting time. I'm looking forward to it for myself and for all of us. And as always, feel free to share any questions you have on the astrology, and I'm very happy to respond to them in the comments. I'm sharing this live on Facebook, and I'm also going to post this on YouTube. Final announcement, I have the retrograde class series, and on, I think, the 12th or the 13th, whatever Friday in the US of November, I'm going to be teaching on Venus retrograde. Venus is actually soon to enter Capricorn, and will be entering the shadow degree. So that's going to be a very powerful class where I'll be speaking to both the upcoming Venus retrograde cycle, it'll be with Pluto, but also the Venus retrograde journey in general. So you can check that out on my website, arimosha.com/retrograde, and stay attuned. I'm in the midst of moving my existing training program, the first year, to completion. And at this point, it looks like around February or March, after I complete the practicum, I will be launching the Heart and Soul Centered Astrology Training Program, which is an evolutionary astrology-based training program. Which I'm starting to realize is about a year and a quarter in its entirety as it's starting to come together. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you're on my mailing list if you want to be informed of those things. Otherwise, you will keep on hearing from it for sure from these videos. Okay, much love to you all. Thank you for joining.